Our staff have not had so-called normal summers in 3 years. In addition, our lives, especially for our younger population, is more and more online. So it's not surprising that our newer counselors are struggling a bit to unleash their imaginations with in-person activities. Join us today as we discuss ideas to help them foster their creativity and bring out their inner child.
You don't lead camp because you love the office. Ultra Camp has everything you need to manage your program so you can spend more time doing what you love. Manage staff, register campers, take payments, and direct communication all in one place.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have seen a lot of changes in our industry over the last 10 years since our podcasting adventure first began. The landscape certainly looks very different as we head into the 2023 camp season, and yet the importance of a well thought out staff training remains the same. This season, we delve into new topics, new ideas for skill development, coping strategies, and ways to support our staff to bring their very best. Yes, the what has certainly changed in the last 10 years, but the why remains the same. Join us this season as we talk about, share, and discover fresh and innovative ways to create a purposeful, thoughtful, and intentional leadership training. The gang is all here. We are so stoked to be back. So let's start off with some introductions. Beth, we go first.
Of course. I'm Beth Allison and grateful not to be alone this week. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a camp consultant and trainer who, as a camp director, always loved planning and experiencing intentional, well thought out leadership training.
Thanks, Beth. And Gabrielle.
Well, my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the directors at Camp Waro. My pronouns are she, her, and Camp Waro is an all-girls camp where we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities, and we do that in French and in English.
Nice. And I'm Ruby Compton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors, which is a consulting and training company for camps and outdoor programs. And I'm based in Western North Carolina in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And today's topic is fostering creativity in our staff. And Beth, I know you're the one who proposed this topic, so I'd love to start off with you. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about what sparked this and where you think we should head from here.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think one of the things that we have become more and more aware of in the last few years is that life outside summer camp is more often than not experienced online, with video games or movies or YouTube or TikTok videos that most of which have incredibly photoshopped images or mind-blowing graphics. And doing things in person, playing outside or having friends over without the use of technology is becoming more and more rare. But at summer camp, we cherish the idea that kids can experience life differently, away from technology and gadgets. And yet, our young staff now is comprised of folks who have grown up in this age of technology and gadgetry and special effects. So how do we help them to foster the kind of creativity that's needed to plan rainy day activities, evening programs, theme days, those kinds of things? If this issue resonates with you, I would start planning next summer's leadership training with a focus on the heart of a child. What can you do to find those moments of pure joy in the little things, those moments of awe in the ordinary, the fascination of slowing down and experiencing things once again like it was the very first time? My suggestion is to go back to their childhood heroes, their childhood cartoons, their favorite movies, their toys. Do a little research. If your youngest counselors are 17 next summer, for example, what were the most popular kids' heroes, movies, toys, games out 10 to 12 years ago? And of course, it's rather ironic, but technology will help you out. So just Google that stuff. So this is where your theme begins once you know some answers. And you could even send out a quick survey to your staff asking for their input to these questions. Why not start with your leadership team being ready to greet them as they arrive for staff training, dressed as their favorite characters from their childhood? So think of movies like Toy Story 3 or Finding Nemo or Frozen or Wreck-It Ralph, or TV shows like SpongeBob SquarePants. Favorite toys of that era were things like the Leap Pad Explorer, Lego Ninja Go, Angry Birds, Fidget Friends, Transformers, Hatchimals. Sit down with your leadership team and get them to help you create a welcoming first hour or two as everybody's arriving that's filled with kids' board games for staff to play, like checkers and dominoes and Kerplunk or Operation. Have toys like Bubbles available to play with or buckets of Lego. And if you listen to our last podcast, keep that Lego around for another session on camp culture later in the week. But head to your local dollar store and pick up a bunch of toys for staff to play with, or ask staff to bring in their favorite childhood toys from home that are likely stashed away in the attic or the garage. You could have a water table all set up in your area of where you're meeting, or you could do a sandbox, or you could set up a craft table for them to create things that they made as a child, like painting with blowing straws, or teaching or tracing their hands and then having them create a creature out of that. Have a dress up station where they can try on whatever costumes they want and, of course, take photos, whatever you can come up with. The idea is to help them remember what fun it was to simply play, to use their imaginations, to create things without pressure or expectations. And throughout training, you can add in things like story time right after lunch, where folks can bring a blanket or a sleeping bag and get comfortable, and you read them one of their favorite short books from their childhood. Or you could each have them bring in one of their dad's old shirts, or grandfather's or uncles or brothers or anyone who's a bigger size than what they wear, and have them wear them backwards as the painting smock and paint with watercolors and large brushes like we all did in kindergarten. In between sessions, you can do things like play hide and seek with like really, really tight boundaries, or hopscotch, or red light, green light, or have sidewalk chalk available, or balloon animals to make, or a bunch of hacky sacks. Set up Jenga in the staff lounge along with a deck of Uno cards. Climb trees, or better yet, if it rains, stop everything and go out and jump in the puddles. For overnight camps with long trainings, you could offer a movie night halfway through training with fun snacks from their childhood, and play a favorite game from back in the day, something like that before the movie starts. So you might pick like Brave, or How to Train Your Dragon, or Despicable Me. Your goal is to get them back into the hearts and minds of a child, to remind them of the delight and the wonder and the awe of being a child and experiencing things for that very first time. And you may be thinking right now, Beth, how on earth am I going to fit all these activities into my already crammed training? And I'm here to tell you that if you're struggling with your staff's creativity when planning activities for their campers, this will be time incredibly well spent. And of course, you're going to be building community the whole time as folks play and laugh and learn together, as well as swap stories of their childhoods. So bring them in and let them play.
Okay, well, we don't need to record anything else because that was just fantastic. So many
I'm
good
ready
ideas.
for my recap.
Well, okay. So I just want to point out that a couple years ago at our last in-person Women in Camp Summit, that we had a big table set up, and I still have these items because I purchased them to bring them to the conference. And I brought like an Etch-a-Sketch and a Bop It and some
And they
kinetic
were so
sand.
fun.
And that was the thing, is like, we didn't even do it as an activity necessarily. It was just out on a table for something people to do during transition time. So I think all these things that Beth is talking about, you don't even have to think about, yes, like include some, this is just time that we're going to play. But there's always that sit around and wait time at trainings when some people get there early and some people are still waiting. So have that stuff available. And I think it's all genius. Like you can fit it into the betweens. And that's, I think, going to make your training
and weave it through the training. So It's not, we don't talk about being a child, the first hour or two, and then we don't do it again for the next 7 days. Just weave it in through.
Yeah. I love it. Awesome. All right, Gabrielle, what has that sparked for you? What are some ideas about fostering creativity do you have to share?
It did remind me of a time when I was 17 and our leadership team created a birthday party for all of the staff, and it was everybody's birthday. And what they did was they lifted the tables up on milk crates. And so the tables came to some of us, it was our chin, to some of us, it was a little bit lower, but either way, it was much higher. We had everything that a typical kid's birthday had, with crayons and drawing on the table with paper, and simple activities, bubbles, et cetera, et cetera. And I just remembered how fun that was just to play during that meal and get our birthday cakes. And I think if I look at it, I remember at 17 how stressed I was. I didn't realize I was so stressed, but I was actually stressed. And I think about what our young adults are going through today and how much I think more stressed some of them are, and how this can really decrease stress. So I really appreciate what you're talking about, Beth, with, but getting back to the heart of the child. For me, I think when we're looking at creativity, sometimes what might happen with a camp professional is you're comparing previous staff to your current team, and you're saying, why can't they be as creative as the 2019 team or before, and how do I get my team back to that? I think one, patience is really important. We're starting over in a lot of cases. Two, it takes an amount of safety to be creative, that you feel safe socially and physically. Three, expectations. What am I allowed to do? Sometimes you want to do things, but you don't know that you're allowed. And what tells you that you are allowed to do something is seeing it being done before. And if your camp has had a couple of gap years, then this wasn't role modeled for our staff members or new staff members that have come in. So one, there's importance is the patience. And then second is, pick an area on camp that you want creativity to thrive. Don't try to do it in your programs, at the tables, in the buses, during group cleanup. This won't happen overnight. So set a goal with your staff. Where are the 2 places on camp, or when are the 2 times on camp that we want to really focus on creating that childlike experience for our campers? And then secondly, I find that creativity can be, when you're running a program, can be divided into two specific areas. One, it can be in the announcement, or one, it can be in the program. Pick which one. Take a typical capture the flag activity and don't mess with it. Leave it as is, but focus on the announcement part and help mentor those staff members on just the announcement, or make it a very, very simple instructions and really amp up and twist that capture the flag experience. So just try to take things in segment, but first and foremost, we have to show our staff members what they're allowed to do, build that confidence with what Beth was talking about before. Those are those examples, building team, and then get specific with your staff. This year, this is what we're going to focus on and why.
Amazing. Yeah, a great example comes to mind about that, breaking it into how you give the announcement versus the program itself, which I think is such a genius point that you made, Gabz. So we played Capture the Flag at the camp that I ran. Pretty traditional game of Capture the Flag, nothing super wild. It was on a big field. Well-known tradition at camp that allowed kids to play at their level of challenge that they wanted to. So nothing really spectacular about that, but the announcement for it being Capture the Flag night was typically like music playing, staff coming out and like playing the game in real time, and then playing it in slow-mo. And it was just captivating. And you would like see them get the flag and run and almost get tagged and then sprint across the line. So again, it wasn't so much that the program we were doing was particularly creative, but the way we shared about it was exciting and interesting, and a creative way to do so.
Yeah, exactly. And Michael Brandwein says, creativity shows campers that you care. So every time you're making an announcement, that is, and he has a wonderful session called Large Group Leadership. And if you ever have an opportunity to see that or buy one of his books to learn the steps on how to do that, Michael's very into steps, and that's sometimes helpful for new staff members that are learning how to do these things. But the big message is that when we're creative, when we're creative with our announcements, it shows that we care. So creativity is a sign of care. And I think that's an extra motivation for our staff to put in that time, or us to create that space for them to be able to do it.
That's awesome. Very good. All right. Well, again, y'all have already thrown down such amazing things that I feel like I don't have as much to offer as I thought I did on this, but play was very much one of the things I wrote down in my notes in prepping for this. And one of the best examples, or one of the times that was resparked for me, was actually during the pandemic. I saw a keynote speech from Jed Dearybury. He is formerly a South Carolina public school teacher. And when he came on, I did not know anything about him. And when he came on the screen, his walls behind him had all this art, and it was like rainbows, and it was colorful, and it was one of those, like, just instantly visually I was like, oh, I want to know what this guy has to say. And like second I was like, oh, I need to redo my office like instantly. And so that idea of creating creativity around folks will simply invite more creativity. And that was digitally, like this was virtually on a Zoom screen in a space this big where his face is taking up most of the screen. He still was able to put interesting stuff enough in the background that I was like, yes, he has set the tone. So think about, if you're doing online trainings, is it just your office in the background, or is there something else you can add? Is there a virtual background you want to use? Do you want to invite folks to put something else in their background, or change their name to their favorite food plus the street they grew up on? Like, allow those playful moments. And it doesn't all have to be done in person. We can start virtually where folks are and where they're comfortable, and play with that. So I'll put a link in the show notes to Jed Dearybury's stuff. Like, his Instagram's a great one. He just posted some stuff about a workshop he did with pipe cleaner hats, and they were some of the coolest hats I have ever seen. Like, I don't know, I've never thought pipe cleaner crafts were super cool, but these were really rad. I was like, I would wear that outside in the world. And so I'll put a link to him, as well as, again, thinking about like online trainings and starting where folks are comfortable, or where you're starting to talk to them, or maybe even when you're interviewing them. Chad Littlefield is another one who runs the company We and Me, who has spent a lot of the pandemic putting out some incredible content on YouTube about how to make your virtual meetings and calls more interesting. And I've taken a lot of their tips and utilized them, and also, like, some of them are in my pie in the sky. I can't wait to do one day. So check those things out. And again, think about that creativity doesn't have to only be and sparking that and getting that idea for it doesn't just have to be when your staff are on site. Awesome. All right, my friends. Well, we need to take a break to hear from our sponsor. And when we come back, we'll share more ideas of what's to come. Do you ever feel like you spend so much time in the office that you've got no time left for camp? The folks at Ultra Camp know you didn't get into camping to do paperwork. Exclusive to Camp Code listeners, you can download Ultra Camp's free guide, 5 unique ways to connect with campers outside of camp, by visiting ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Ultra Camp created software to help camp professionals like yourself handle camp registration quickly and efficiently. Pricing that is transparent and flexible means that you can rest easy and focus on what's important, your campers. Ultra Camp offers no long-term contracts, clear pricing with no hidden costs, low minimum entry, and flexible payment terms. Ultra Camp's goal is to provide resources so their clients can spend more time in camp doing what they do best. And if all of this doesn't sound like your registration software, don't you think it should? Visit their website, ultracampmanagement.com/campcode, and set up a time to chat. They look forward to meeting you. And we're back. All right, so we're talking about fostering creativity in our staff. And I don't know, that might have been the best 15 minutes we've podcasted in a while. So I'm pretty excited about it. So let's keep going. Beth, what are some more ideas that you have?
I think we're excited about the idea of creativity and fostering
Yes.
creativity. All right. So continuing with the concept of imagination and play during staff training, I would run a few sessions based entirely on this subject. So you could do something like start with a game of Wind in the Willows, but let them know that the statement they make to folks before, they have to move spots has to be based on childhood experiences. So, for example, somebody could say something like, my favorite childhood meal was Kraft dinner. And then, of course, everybody who agrees has to change places with all those who are already moving. Or they could say, my favorite TV cartoon when I was a kid was Scooby-Doo, or like whatever they want to share, but it has to be from their childhood and something positive. And you could then pull them into small groups, dividing them intentionally and creatively through a fun activity or game, and then let them journal for a few minutes. You want to be able to ask them questions that you've prepared ahead of time, or that maybe they want to add in after you get going. But things like, what was the very best gift you ever received as a child? Or share the details of your favorite Christmas or Hanukkah or Eid or whatever holiday you choose. Explain a perfect day when you were 10 years old. And so as they're writing or doodling their answers, what I want you to do is play songs from their childhoods in the background, and sit around and watch the fun begin when they start singing along. And then allow them to share their answers with smaller groups. And of course, this is great community building. And now ask all the smaller groups to take a look at what folks shared and come up with some common themes. Why were these favorites of people? Why did you love those particular activities or spending time with that particular grandparent? Or why did you love that particular toy that you mentioned? Then you can share the answers in a large group and have a discussion as to how you can bring this childhood magic, because that's what it is they're going to be talking about, back to your campers during the summer. So I have one more idea, but I'll save it for the last round.
Awesome.
I love it. And I love these ideas. And also I want to make sure that we remember that not every child or every person had a great childhood. So thinking
That's
about
right.
how are you going to
That's right.
manage that too?
100%.
How are you going to leave space for that? Or how you ask the questions, like what were some favorites at, when you all were growing up? So I mean, I think about like when Gabz, you said the birthday party, like it may be that somebody didn't ever have a really great birthday party,
Yes.
but they probably saw one on TV. So I think that nostalgia can be there. We just have to be cautious about how we approach it.
Always.
Cool. All right, Gabrielle.
I would suggest let's play the game, or let's create opportunities for something that I want to call disruptor. So I think routine we know that routine is really important for campers in feeling like they have a place at camp. Once you understand what your group cleanup looks like and you feel comfortable in it, this is now becomes part of your routine. You understand, okay, this is how this place works, how meals work, how brushing our teeth, how the bus system works. This is all very important. Routine creates calmness, a place, expectation, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that what I would set up as a goal for our staff members is to focus on routine and be very, very explicit in guiding our campers in the routine. And once they are good within the routine, then you can introduce a disruptor moment. So if a cabin group has locked down how they do their group cleanup, then maybe on day 5, they get, all of a sudden there's a note in the cabin and there is a treasure hunt, and part of the treasure hunt is going to the kitchen, and then at the kitchen you're helping to peel corn on the cob, and then there's an announcement that says thank you to the group that peeled the corn on the cob. Having these opportunities where we focus help our staff members understand that routine is important, and when we have routine, then we can add in these special events. This is what makes camp magic in some ways. It's the same thing as an unexpected stargazing in the evening, or that the camp director makes an appearance at the parking lot where they're typically not there, dressed in whatever character they are that day. So introducing disruptors in the routine once the routine is set, so that those create those little special camp moments. And I would actually plan it with our staff in the schedule and say, when are you doing your disruptor with your group? And you can come up with another title, of course. I just like this idea because you're disrupting things, but in a fun and helpful way. It can also be the older campers going and bringing the younger campers to buddy swim, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So look at your camp. When is their typical routines? When could we create this space for having adventures beyond that routine?
Gabz, I think you need a t-shirt this year at camp that's #disruptor.
Yes. Well, we can get into philosophical conversations about that I'm like, I think disrupting is very important in a societal sense. So I think there's a lot of deep conversations we can have. We can start with it on a playful
At least a
way.
sticker. Yeah.
Oh, sure. At least a sticker.
Perfect. Okay, I would argue that this generation of kids and staff are actually some of the most creative. We just are having to reprogram our understanding of what creativity looks like a bit. And so, I mean, there's stuff that I see online that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so creative and cool. And
totally.
And that piece that Beth was talking about is like, how do we get folks to see that stuff and then translate it to the real world? And one of the very real things that happens online And, shout out to Kelly Farage at ACA, who did a session about TikTok at the Southeastern Conference. And the sentence that she said that I've been still thinking about ever since is that the posts that do well are on TikTok are the ones that copy other posts that are already doing well. So once there's a format that is working, if you are a content creator and you use that same template, it's why you see the same kind of posts go viral, is because the platform accelerates those. So all of this meta talk that I'm doing, I think we can bring that to camp, right? So the things that you really want your staff to be creative about, make sure you are putting extra time during training into being creative on those things, because that is what they will understand that they have the permission to be creative about. And things that you don't really want them to necessarily be super creative about, like establishing those routines early on, maybe don't like have a bunch of silly hats the very first day. Maybe that comes out later. So just think about that. Whatever you do during training is what they're going to copy. That's the algorithm that does well. And so think about where you're investing that energy and time, but also giving them the tools. And Beth has given you a ton of great tools for that, to translate how we can see something really cool and go, I want to be creative here. I'm allowed to be creative here. Now, how can I make that happen in person?
Brilliant.
Cool. I think
Love,
we have
love.
another round in us. So Beth, do you have other thoughts you want to share?
Sure. Another activity during training, so later in the week after you've done some of the other things that we've been suggesting to you here, and of course adding in your own flair, would be to break them into smaller groups and give each group an activity that you usually offer at camp. So a theme meal or an annual game like Capture the Flag we've been talking about, or campfire or an announcement, big and small parts of your day. So mix it up and then ask each group to come up with at least 3 or 4 ways that they can make this experience more creative, more exciting, more magical. And again, throw on some great tunes and let them plan. And if you're walking around the room, which you always should be when you're facilitating these kind of small group discussions, and you feel like folks are really struggling a bit, stop everything and ask them why. If they don't really know, ask them how it could be easier. Would it be easier if they could use technology? And my guess is the answer would be a resounding yes. So then, as Ruby said, ask them to figure out how they could create that kind of experience without using the internet and movie magic. How could they bring characters, sound effects, other special effects to life at camp without all that technology? One of my very favorite moments like this happened during a staff training weekend. So prior to camp starting, it was about a month earlier. And the resource staff did a campfire based on Twilight, the movie, or the books. And it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But they had all the characters involved who would come out and lead songs and so on. And at the end, this was inside the lodge at the time, a little too cold in May in Ontario to be sitting outside at night. But it was very, very dark. And so Edward came rushing in at the end, and all of a sudden turned his face, and the flashlights went from the other members of the resource staff to his face, and he was covered in glitter, like covered. His whole face just sparkled and shone, and it had all these diamonds. Like, we were laughing so hard I could barely like stay sitting up on the floor. I was like rolling over.
Oh, it's so good.
So it was just a great moment. Now for them, because this was all staff, that was age appropriate. You may not, maybe 7-year-olds don't know who Edward is, whatever, but at the time it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So when time is up and you've had these kind of discussions about how you can translate some of that, put them together with a second group and share what they've come up with, and allow the other group to add ideas, and ask then, after everybody's had this time, each group to briefly explain what the other group's vision was and to share what they felt were the top 3 creative ideas. So you want to congratulate everybody for thinking outside the box for the 45 minutes or however long you did this for, and stretching their imaginations and letting them know how important this is for offering campers that phenomenal experience. But be sure they understand that you don't expect them to fit in these creative moments every single second of the day. You're just helping them with a few ideas to get them inspired and to show them ways that they can take ordinary moments every now and then in a camp day and make them extraordinary. And of course, you're going to need to lead staff training by example in all things, but by particularly being creative and using your imagination when you're planning, because we can't expect them to be creative if we ourselves aren't putting in some sort of effort to do that.
Beautiful. Gabz, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this topic?
I'd just like to add that that if this is your theme, this is what you're aiming for this summer, bring your leadership team members in and talk about how can we recognize the little efforts that our staff members are doing, whether it be conscious or subconsciously, that we're rewarding by providing consistent feedback on what we're seeing, especially when it comes to taking healthy risks, and help our leadership team members be able to, one, recognize what that looks like, and then two, how to want to provide that positive feedback. That goes a long way. I can still remember positive feedback from when I was 11 years old. It was my counselor about my sweeping, and now I sweep very well still, all the way until probably whoever spoke to me last recently and said something nice about something that I was doing, especially if it caught me a little bit off guard. I thought I was just doing what I typically do. And I think sometimes at camp, when we see people do just quote unquote typical things, but that's the behavior that we actually want to see with the campers, we sometimes miss that opportunity. So I would brainstorm with my staff members. What does it look like, and how do we want to provide that, and make it a mission that we're at least touching base with every single one of our staff members before our campers arrive.
Nice. You saw me like snapping hard about
I did.
Bring in your leadership team. I also would recommend that this is my last little tip, is that if you're going to do any, bringing back songs or toys or references to pop culture, check your references and make sure you have the right generation.
Yes.
Yes, 100%.
I was at an ice cream shop. We were at the conference a couple of weeks ago, and they had a Dunkamoos ice cream, and I was with some people that were my age and older, and then some people that were newer directors, and we were like, yeah, Dunkaroos, don't you remember Dunkaroos? And the younger folks were like, no, not at all.
And you sound like, when you say it, also so excited, like, yeah, Dunkaroos, as you hear the word Dunkaroos come out of your mouth, it's like, I also sound ridiculous as I'm saying it to somebody that has no idea what that means.
So yeah,
I love that.
Just check in with that. And I think about too, that thing that when I was a kid, when an adult seemed to take interest in a thing that I really cared about, there was a little bit about like, why are you asking? Like, is something wrong? Am I not allowed to use this thing anymore? So just make sure that if you're approaching these conversations with youth or with young adults, like really come from a space of being open to learn, and so that hopefully you can get the more honest answer, not the answer they like, oh yeah, I know Dunkaroos. Like, no, they had no clue. Never heard of it. All right. So on that note, it is time. I'm going to hand it over to Gabrielle for the recap.
There's our song. We'll get there on our song that I sing. All right. So we're looking at fostering creativity in our staff. And first and foremost, we have to know that our staff are at camp because they do want to have fun, and maybe they just don't know how to do that kind of leadership. So staff training is the perfect time to role model just having fun. As a camp director, sometimes I am looking at what kind of team building activities that I can do to bring my staff together. Look no further. Check out what Beth is saying. Look at this theme, Heart of a Child. Get them to give you the information. You do not need to come up with these activities. And some of these activities are very, very low cost, and it will tap right into their nostalgia. And speaking about nostalgia, let's make sure that nostalgia is appropriate to their experience and not our experience. So bringing in your leadership team to get these ideas, or as Beth was saying, check out a survey and see what connects with food, with characters, with activities, so you can be prepared before our staff arrive for staff training. And when we're at staff training, let's make sure that our expectations are realistic. We have to be patient with our staff members. This is new. We're all still learning how to people again. And so pick specific times in the day or activities or schedules that you want your staff members to focus on when it comes to creativity. Why? Because creativity means that we care, and that's what we're trying to share with our staff members. We're not just trying to have fun. We're trying to show our campers that we care. And when we care, we build routine. And when we build build routine, we break that routine with disrupting so that we can have magical camp experiences. And speaking of magical camp experiences, have you ever heard of the name Jed Dearybury? That is an actual name, Jed Dearybury. There's also more names. Chad Littlefield is also a real name. And then we have Kelly Fridge. So these are Farridge, I believe. So these are 3 people that you might want to look for to help you set the tone even before you come to camp on Zoom, and also great ideas on what you can do at camp. I love having resources from Ruby, so thank you so much for that. At the end of the day, we're trying to build connection with our campers, and to do that, we need to build connections with our staff, and to do that, let's help them build connections with themselves. And why not start with nostalgic, positive experiences that they had as children, so that they can transfer that information on what we're trying to do for our campers this summer.
Beautiful. Well done. Well done. So good.
So
All right,
good.
my friends. Well, we'd love for you to get involved with the podcast. You can tell us your thoughts on this episode by using the hashtag #CampCode. You can also tell us what topics you'd like for us to discuss, any guests you'd recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips you have to share. We'd love to hear from you because we are all about sharing in this industry. And if you found this podcast to be useful, please leave a rating and review for us in your podcasting app of choice. Your feedback helps keep the show going, as well as helps other folks find the show who need it. If you would like to contact us, we'll do a quick round and tell us where you can find us. Tell you where you can find us. Beth, where can folks find you?
Our website's gocamp.pro. I'm Beth at gocamp.pro if you want to email me, or I'm on Twitter at Topaz.
And Gabrielle.
You can check out where I work at waro.com, ouareau.com, or you can email me at info@waro, as well as you can check out myself on Instagram, Gabrielle Rail with 2 L's.
And you can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com, and find me on Instagram at rubyoutdoors, and check out what I do at rubyoutdoors.com. For our next podcast, we've heard you. We've heard camp directors loud and clear. Teaching initiative is something that folks are struggling with. So we're going to take some time on that for our next episode.
Can you even teach initiative, Ruby?
Can it be done? I don't know.
Can it be done?
We're going to talk about, you're going to have to tune in and find out. And our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And we would love to hear some of your most memorable moments or most effective tips. You can tell us what they are using that hashtag #CampCode. And this week's best practice is Gabrielle.
My best practice is inspired by Travis Allison. Travis typically travels with a little cue card box with cue cards in it, and inside that box there's a whole bunch of games that I believe that he's organized by category. I think Beth has an example up here. It is there. It is. If
I
you're
have
seeing
3
us.
of them.
Oh my gosh, wonderful. Is there titles at the
Yes.
labeled
So
on the top?
this one's the adventure programming box. This one is intro games.
Ooh.
And this one is the very Canadian games box, eh?
Appropriate. So this is, if you are this is important. If you have a great memory, doesn't matter, tracking all of your activities so that you're not getting in the rut of, for me, it's literally 3 games I will repeat over and over and over again. Some people can go all the way to 5 or 10 games that they can do, but this gives you your endless supply of activities that you've learned when you go to conferences, that you write these cue cards up and you keep them in your box. Now, I would like to transfer this over to staff members. It's not super necessarily practical for every single staff member to have a cue card box. But I remember one year Jackie bought all the staff members little notebooks that had little mini hoodies on them. She got them from the dollar store. It's very Jackie. She loves these sort of cute little things. Staff went berserk for them. And it was part of a staff training protocol that you had to bring your little hoodie notebook with you. And one of the things that I shifted with our sessions was to always provide time after any activity that we did for staff members to write down those activities. And that's something that I saw at a conference when I went to go see Jim Kane speak. I remember these games are amazing, but I'm going to forget. And every time I went to write something down, he has so many activities, so he goes right to the next one. And I barely had time to write stuff down. And I said to myself, okay, I'm going to make sure we have time to write things down. And then of course we want to make sure that staff members keep those little notebooks with them, especially for the first 3-4 days of camp where we're trying to build community with our campers. So thanks, Travis.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Camp Code is a part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network. Check out all other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. There are 7 podcasts in all, each with a different focus to help as many camp folks as we can. Give them a listen. From all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.